Well, I'm here with my friend Sara Chesterman. Hello, Sara. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Tell us, what's the level of your injury?
C67, complete from C7.
Great. So, when did you incur your injury?
1996 in January.
It's a while ago now. How many years is that?
Oof, I've lost count.
24?
25.
Wow. So, have you been living for longer with the injury than without by now?
I just kicked over the mark.
Ah, there you go. So, tell us a bit about life before the injury then. What was your life like? What were you doing? How old were you?
I was 24 at the time of the injury.
Yeah.
And I was studying architecture at New South Wales Uni. But I was really passionate about dancing. And so I managed to organise my studies so that I could study part-time, which was not strictly legal, so that I could dance at the same time. And I was really passionate about how architecture was all about the visual and not about feeling the body and sensing the body. And dance was so involved in, the body and experiencing the body in space. And so it was not classical ballet, it was more contemporary dance and in particular contact improvisation and something called body mind centering.
We'll have to come back to that because I guess that becomes relevant later on, but
Yeah.
Let's see. So you picked up some skills prior to the injury that you think helped you after the injury?
Absolutely, yeah, central.
So, all right, tell us about the injury then. How did you injure yourself? And
I was on somebody's shoulders in the surf, and in Byron Bay at the time. I'd run away from a dance rehearsal to go on a really last-minute holiday with friends who were dancing at the Byron Bay Festival, and I was on the shoulders of somebody, and we were kind of practicing circus tricks, and I panicked, thought the water was deeper than it was, and I dived off straight into sand, and immediately I was paralysed, so I couldn't move at all.
how scary is that? I can't imagine breaking your neck underneath the water.
Well, I didn't have time to be scared, which was amazing, because for some reason the wave came and rolled me, so I was able to breathe straight away, and I'm so thankful for that. So I don't remember panicking. I remember being shocked, but not panicking, and I was able to yell. And for some reason, as a child, I'd had a voluntary subject to pick as a project, and it was all about spinal cord injury. And so I knew all about, what you shouldn't move, you shouldn't, need to be supported, you shouldn't be picked up. So I yelled for someone to help me, and they held my head in the surf, and then the self-lifesavers were there really quickly. And they put me on a spinal board, which was amazing, and then waited for the helicopter to come from Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane.
So you did your rehab in Brisbane?
Yeah.
How many months was that in those days?
I was 9.5 weeks in traction. So that was...
You don't see a lot of traction nowadays.
No.
So what's traction? How does that work, and what was that like?
Traction is they drill holes into your head when you're on pethidine, which when I was on pethidine I had lots of fun. I was like seeing visions. But they drill holes in your head, and then they hang weights off the back, and you lie on a bed, and the bed actually rolls you, so every 4 hours you're rolled. So I was completely paralysed.
Sounds horrifying.
Yeah, it was. I was in shock for most of that time, and when I look back on it, I was actually thankful. I watched people who went and had surgeries straight away and were up in their chair in a week. In some ways, I'm thankful I had to lie still for that 9.5 weeks, as hard as it was. There wasn't like pressure on me I was just able to have time to just lie with it. I had to lie with it.
So you came out of hospital and moved down to Sydney again?
I came down to Sydney and did half of my rehab, or most of my rehab down in Sydney, so 6 months in Sydney. And then I came home and lived with my aunt for 6 months because I wasn't able to live with my parents. And then I moved into a house that my parents were thankfully able to buy for me and renovate. And that was in 1998, I think. No, 1997.
And that's the same house you're in now?
Same house I'm in now, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the loss of the injury and the impact when you first come home. Were you the type of person who came home and just, it was just easier and you launched straight into life, or for you was that adjustment period a challenge?
I came from a family where, achievement and what you did was really important, and being busy. And I was in a lot of denial about where I was at physically. And I was also so excited about being home and doing stuff. So I just took on everything. Moving into a house with flatmates, cooking, learning how to cook again. And then 6 months after a few months after I moved into this house, I started my fine arts degree, thinking that I'd learned to draw doing fine arts.
You didn't think you'd be able to be an architect? So
No, I thought I would return to architecture.
Okay.
And then I'd do a stint at art school to learn to draw again. So I started that very early on, and back into dancing as well.
Okay, so you found the transition quite easy, but my understanding of your story is a little bit down the track you crashed and suddenly realised what you'd lost. So why don't you tell us about that crash and the loss and its impact on you?
Okay. So...
And how far down the track was that?
It was probably... It's a good question. I've forgotten now. It was probably about 4 or 5 years after injury.
Wow, that long.
Yeah, I was, or maybe even more, because at that stage I was lecturing at uni part-time, studying part-time, driving, transferring myself in and out of the car from a manual wheelchair, and solely living in a manual wheelchair, because at that stage the rehab was all about maximising ability with as little support as possible.
So you were the stereotypical achiever at that point in time.
Super cripple.
Super cripple.
Super cripple.
I love that phraseology.
I had the super cripple complex that I could do everything.
Denying your loss, you think, a little bit at that point?
A little bit denying my loss.
Yeah.
Denying not denying my loss, but denying that I needed to reshape my life to meet what my body was telling me. So I was pushing through a lot of pain, and I was teaching, tutes that went for 6 hours, and I'd come home after work and my partner I would just lie in bed for the next 24 hours in so much pain I couldn't move, and my partner would support me through all of that. And I think that it just became too much for him, understandably, and we sort of fell apart.
Yep.
And I fell apart too.
Yep.
So there I was, I had to give up my job. I was still continuing my uni, but I stopped working. And I was in so much pain that I was just lying in bed and couldn't move. Like if I was under the doona, and if I lifted my hand, there was so much pain that it would feel like knives were cutting and I remember lying there going, I'm thirsty. Do I go ride through the pain of picking up that water bottle, or do I cope with being thirsty? And at that point, the support that I was getting in terms of paid support was just so minimal. It's, a fifth of what I get now, like less. It was crazy.
And that crash lasted for 6 months or so. So then how did you cope, and how did you begin to transition out of the loss? And
well, I mean, I'd done, as I said before, a lot of body-mind centering. So I did have an insight, and body-mind centering is used by a lot of dancers as a way of generating content, and you go into your body and you experience different systems of the body you experience your body on different layers, I suppose. you might focus on skin or muscle and you move from that place. And you use a lot of, and also I experience a bit of meditation and a bit of energy work through the dance work that I've been doing. And at the same time, one of my flatmates turned up back from England after she'd spent some time in a monastery with a monk who disrobed to be with her. And I remember lying on my bed, looking out the window and seeing him sitting on the couch reading a book on the art of sitting. And I was like, yeah, right, sitting's actually quite hard. And if he's reading a book about it, surely I can do that. Surely I sit all day. Surely I can get good at that. That's something I can do. And so I asked him to start teaching me meditation. And he came from a Buddhist background, Buddhist tradition. And so he started to teach me meditation. And I remember the first time, like the first 20 minutes I sat, I had this constant pain in my left shoulder that had not gone away for years. And I thought it was this constant block of pain and it never changed. And I sat there for 20 minutes and he just asked me to notice whatever was going on in my body. And in that 20 minutes, I noticed that the pain just changed the whole way through, like changed from heat to cold to pain to sharp to tingling. And at the end of that 20 minutes, even though the pain hadn't gone and I hadn't really changed my relationship to it, I realised that there was hope, that it could change because it was changing already. It wasn't static, it wasn't still. So that was really key. And then I was also ready for my honours year in painting and drawing, and I'd been doing a lot of physical work with charcoal, big works, and trying to, I had lecturers who would just give me an assignment and go, you can work it out how to do it. I had to adapt, which was great, but also very physically demanding because sometimes we'd be asked to do wall-sized pieces and me and my denial would just do it. But I was able to direct my own work in the honours year and I changed from charcoal to watercolour and I started a process of painting that was really key to helping me find a way through.
So you talk about denial, and I guess that relates not only to your own capacity but to grief and loss. So you could no longer dance, or could you? So, I mean, when you think about your grief and loss then, what's at the heart of that grief and loss, and are you still grieving and grieving today? Or in what way has that grief changed or left you or continued?
I was definitely grieving back then. Whether I'm still grieving now, a lot less. Like a lot less, which is amazing to say that because years ago I think I would never have thought that possible. And, one of my biggest griefs, I used to play the piano and I used to teach little kids the piano, and piano and music were a really big part of my life. And that was one of my big losses, was not being able. But I've been able to support my son in playing the piano, and he plays the piano now, and he's really into music, and just realising that I can, find ways of entering things without actually doing it myself. Being so physically demanding on myself. Changing my relationship to the sense of achievement and what is achievement and what's important. And that, I think, it's got a lot to do with the meditation practice and and also that painting, that initial painting process. It really linked me because I was able to find, I was able to dance post the injury. I was really integrated into the dance community after my accident, but when I collapsed again, I stopped that. But then I found the process of dance through my painting. I found that connection, and for me, I think the dancing that was really important to me was connection to others and improvisation, the freedom of being in the moment, and creativity. They were the three things, and just kind of, I think by just experimenting and trying and being supported to do that, mainly through friends, and encouraged to do that, that really allowed me to find different avenues for the things that were key to me within those things that I was doing prior to my accident.
It's beautiful. I love the idea that creativity, because I guess with a spinal cord injury, you're having to start again in so many ways, and I guess creativity is the key to actually doing that. Did you also find that art provided you a way of expressing and therefore working through loss and grief?
Good question. I'm not. Probably. I think it was more the. It was like I wasn't having to grieve what I thought I had to grieve, because I was finding a different way of connecting to what was important. So then the grief about not playing the piano or not dancing in the same way as I was able to dance became not important, because my life was filled with something else that gave me that same satisfaction. So, yeah, it kind of displaced the grief, maybe is a way of putting it.
So when you think back then on your injury and who you've become, actually let me just flesh out on that. We need to say, who have you become? Who are you now then? If you were to sort of describe your life now, what would you say about yourself?
I think I'm less of a pain in the ass.
Yep.
To be honest.
Yep. Well, let me first of all say you've had a partner for 20 years and a son. Is that all right?
Yeah, he's 10 now.
And 10-year-old son.
Yeah.
Yep. So you've become a mother, and you did all that since the injury, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is intriguing, isn't it? Many people thought that. Did you think motherhood was beyond you?
I was told by a nurse very early on that I couldn't have children, and that was wrong. But I believed it for a few months because I didn't speak to anyone about it. And I was surprised because at 24 I was like, I don't want to have kids. Why would you have kids? I want to be like, free and independent for the rest of my life. I've got so much to do. And when I thought that had been taken away from me, I just lost it. That was the thing that I grieved the most. Like, it was beyond not being able to move. It was beyond not being able to feel. And it shocked me. It really shocked me.
Didn't even know you wanted a kid, and all of a sudden...
Yeah, suddenly it's taken away from me. I went, oh my goodness, that is too much to bear. And I actually didn't think we could have children, because I had lots of bouts of illness, and just before I got pregnant I was actually almost 20 kilos underweight. And we were trying to work out what it was, and I was really sick and nauseous and unable to get out of bed for 3 months. And I was super underweight, like 20 kilos underweight. And then I got better, I got up. 2 weeks later, I started getting sick again. And it was just one of my carers who was trying to get pregnant. And she said for a joke to me, not sort of a joke, she went, "You're feeling nauseous, maybe you're pregnant." So we did a pregnancy test. And I got the shock of my life. So suddenly I was just pregnant out of nowhere. And it was just, I got such a shock that I get cold sores, and every single surface of my lip was just covered in cold sores. And I went to bed for 2 days because I just didn't know how I would be able to do it. But equally, I was super, super happy as well.
And has motherhood been much more complicated with a spinal cord injury? Or it's difficult regardless of whether you've got a spinal cord injury or not? Yeah,
good point. Good question. I think it's challenging on so many levels, no matter whether you've got a spinal cord injury or not. It's taught me a lot. And it pushed me also into, I wouldn't say that was the Jacob being a baby, it was the lack of support around it, and my struggle with that pushed me into quite severe depression and panic attacks when he was about 3 or 4. And I think also from my history with my mother. But the challenging part was to have people support him and still maintain that relationship with him. There were amazing things where, I couldn't jump up if he fell, and help him if he fell over. And I couldn't, if he started crying, I couldn't make it better straight away. And I realised pretty quickly that the more I stayed out of the way, often the better it was. And so that stillness that I had to embrace, and that distance, and that I could create connection with him through voice or through energy, and when he was 18 months old, 2 years old, I was going to the park with him alone and taking him on public transport alone, and he was fine and I was fine. We were doing lots of shopping, and it was a challenge getting him home from the playground because he had to climb his way up. When he was 3 or 4, he was pretty defiant. But there were ways around it, even if it was telling him that the tree over there was going to pick him up and put me on my lap if he didn't do it himself. It worked. He loves that story now.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you basically learned how to parent in a different way. If you look back on your life, what positive changes do you think have you experienced through your injury, and maybe even because of your injury?
I'm not so attached to achievement, not so attached to being busy, a connection with the need to be still, and needing to realise, and when you're realising that when I'm in hospital that I need to learn to stay with myself, otherwise I just get pulled out of myself and get sicker. So that those really challenging times where I realise that if I don't go into my centre and don't connect with that still place, with something bigger than myself, then I'm going to be pulled down or going to suffer more than I need to. So that kind of connection between that idea that suffering is a choice, pain is inevitable, and suffering is a choice. I love that idea. It's a really challenging one when I wake up every morning with potentially quite severe pain, but it's like when you think about those Zen monks sitting there and they get whacked over the head with a bamboo cane if they come out of that state. It's like my pain or whatever health challenge is coming up is like that. So that's what it's given me.
You've learnt these really rich, difficult lessons through the challenges of life. Can you think of ways in which the injury has had a negative impact on your sense of meaning and purpose? Did you lose some meaning and purpose when you first had your injury? Or has it all been positive?
I did have, therapy support to help me find that meaning and purpose. And as I said, I had a strong connection with the dance and art community. So meaning and purpose was central to the way my friends looked at me, really. They kept that meaning and purpose alive for me. It made it possible because I had that support. I remember when I had my injury and I had a lot of people coming to visit me, I kept being given that gift by the people around me, the gift of acceptance of where I'm at, that what was happening was not ugly or something that needed to be pushed away and not integrated, which, I remember when my mother died, it's really challenging seeing someone. I think it's more challenging seeing someone in a hospital bed than being in it yourself in some ways, because it is this kind of real aversion, and it's really challenging emotionally, but I already lived in a community that already integrated with the disabled community. So there are a lot of people who probably had turned to dance as well because of challenges in their lives. Not necessarily because of disability, but because of other emotional challenges. So I feel like I was supported by a group of people who were keen to support any meaning and purpose and saw the importance of it. So perhaps I didn't so much, and that's what sustained me.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I don't know.
25 years down the track then, what makes life meaningful for you now? What do you get up in the morning for?
Cooking.
What are you passionate about?
Cooking
Yeah?
at the moment because I
You've just renovated a kitchen?
Yeah, cooking. Like I didn't cook for 15 years. I love cooking. I didn't cook for 15 years, and I always advise people, stop cooking for 15 years, start cooking again, and it's like cooking in 4D. Like I cooked my son's first birthday cake when he was 10, like his mother cooked his birthday. He'd always had birthday cakes, but by me, and it was incredible. The butter was just so smooth, and it was seriously like this ecstatic experience. So cooking at the moment, because I've only been doing that for a few months really, and 6 months now I think. And I've just started drawing again and reconnecting to drawing. So that, like, the fascination with how to turn the 3D object into something on 2D and make it interesting to look at is just, I find, I've done quite a lot of study at university, but I think that has been the most intellectually fully challenging, absorbing thing for me to do. A drawing class, 3-hour drawing class, is much more exhausting than I find any other intellectual activity. And singing. Yeah.
What do you sing? What do you read?
Well, at the moment I'm just reading through, we've read through most of my books that I read when I was a kid. Reading my son books is mainly at the moment what I'm doing in terms of reading. But I read a bit about meditation. And singing, when Jake was little, that's what I used to do to him, sing every night. And, I think most people, unless you've got an amazing voice, have a real kind of fear of their own voice. I don't feel like it's good enough. I definitely felt that way. And he would love me singing. It was like the thing that he just gave me so much self-confidence around my singing. That was the thing that was punishment. I won't sing you, I'll only sing you 2 songs tonight instead of 3. If you don't, it would work. So that was great for my confidence. So at the moment, I've actually just started taking singing lessons with a friend of mine, and I'm working towards trying to record some of those songs for my son.
Because obviously with a spinal cord injury at your level, and I've got the same, I find breathing difficult. So how are you going with singing? That's a fascinating...
Well, a lot of exercises, so it's really good for lung capacity and strength, and I find it exhausting when I do a practice. But she also works a lot with, she does a lot of meditation as well, but she also works a lot with just relaxing all those muscles that we naturally overuse because we're not, and feeling comfortable with it. That fear at the end, I don't know, when I meditate, the fear at the end of the breath, that the next breath isn't going to come. So, the exercise of letting the breath exhale and then just relaxing and noticing that actually the breath comes in by itself. We don't have to do anything. But to go to that place and be at that point where you're relaxing and not doing anything to get that new breath is, I find it can invoke quite strong panic. And it's taken me a long time to get to the place where I can just do that. And so trust, and then also just, almost speaking the singing rather than singing the singing, not trying to perform it, it's just a voice, it's not.
This is so interesting because the way you're talking about singing is actually connected to the way you talk about life. You talked about having let go of achievement, and there's a sense in which you're talking about, or this description of singing is very symbolic of that sense of relaxing, trusting life, letting be what will be. Really intriguing. When you think about yourself and your accomplishments in the last 25 years or so, what are you most proud of? What has maybe living with a spinal cord injury shown you about yourself, your own strengths?
I think the ability to stay calm in a difficult situation, developing that ability. There's always layers of that. I think having a good relationship with my son, it's It is challenging, you know. I do doubt myself sometimes, and I do worry that I'm not giving him everything he needs. But then when I'm step back from it and I'm calm about it, I see the beauty of our relationship. And the ability to develop good relationships with people who support me, my carers, and you know, directing my own care and creating a work environment for my carers, which I find is appreciated.
One of your carers is sitting on the side there. You were actually one of the first. I actually first met you when you were talking about. You're one of the very first persons to do self-managed care, weren't you? So you've been a groundbreaker in terms of managing your own care. So congratulations for that. When you look back at yourself, and were there things about yourself that actually were weaknesses that you really had to work on and maybe are still working on at the moment?
Overachievement, overworking, getting up in the morning and have this massive list that I don't feel good about myself unless it's all done. Lack of self-worth, lack of the ability to be still.
Yeah. It's interesting because they're also the things that are that you've achieved or that are central to your well-being. So there's a connection, isn't there, between the things that you value but you still need to work on because we're always imperfect. So when you look back again over life, what relationships and friendships have been important to you? And what is it that's about them that's been important?
My teachers, like my dance teachers, my meditation teachers, my Aikido teacher, sensei, and the importance of those have been that I've always managed to find teachers and a yoga teacher as well, oh my goodness, that I feel like they're kind of one step ahead. They've been further than me in terms of dealing with difficulty or pain or whatever it is that, or ability to stay calm in a situation. My sensei is just incredible. Aikido is a martial art where if somebody attacks you, you accept it as a gift, like a lot of martial arts do, and then you see that energy not as negative or positive, you just see it as energy, and then you direct that energy in a spiral, one way, it's spiral around your body, and send that energy down into the earth. So the whole underlying principle of Aikido is, it's like this utopic vision of world peace, that if we all did this, then all energy that is negative would be thrown into the earth. And so as a Aikido practitioner, you look after yourself, but you also look after your attacker. You see that attacker as someone who's off balance. And what you're trying to do is bring them back to center while maintaining your own center. So it's a really beautiful martial art form. And I've been going to the dojo where I practice for 10 years or more now, on and off. And I practice what's called ki cultivation, which is energy cultivation. So ki is chi, same thing. So it's about relating to others physically or not physically and maintaining a center and vertical alignment and connection to something bigger than yourself to be peaceful.
So in terms of friendships, so mentoring in that sense has been important with these friendships. You've had a partner for now 20 years. Talk to us about the challenges of marriage with a spinal cord injury or the joys and blessings of it.
The joys and blessings is that I have learnt to accept my vulnerability and accept a massive amount of support and care, and that's been given with such patience and kindness and good humour. The gift of that, I actually wrote about it a few weeks, about last week. I was writing because I need to get clear about, in some ways, you always question your relationships, and to write about it and read it out to a friend was really helpful to really see the hugeness of the gift, and to see that somebody could, see caring for another person as and being in a relationship with someone who needed so much support, and particularly someone who's male rather than female, that is a valuable thing to do, because care was definitely not valued in my family when I grew up, and it definitely wasn't valued after my injury. So that, and then humour, and he's the type of guy who, I'm very, directed and achieving, and he'll just walk in and I'll be trying to do something, and he's one of those guys who'll just sacrifice himself for a joke. He'd almost kill himself to create a punchline. He's always getting bruised knees and falling over and stuff just because he's trying to make someone laugh. So that kind of chaos has been really good for me.
It's delightful. You talk about the extent to which you've had to learn to receive. How do you give in that relationship? Do you find that a challenge, that mutual giving, and how have you worked out your contribution to that?
Great question, because that is something that I really got subsumed in valuing what he was doing and not valuing myself, and getting really sucked into that relationship in that sense. And how do I give by receiving, I've realised, in a lot of ways, to receive well. And that's what I saw when I had Jacob. That was probably the biggest gift, was to see how much he gave me by needing my care, and by accepting that care unconditionally was amazing. Yeah, to be able to receive fully and with gratitude and with no, like that thing of I could do it better, or that's so hard to do. I could do it faster. That thing of not letting that energy come in and dominate the relationship. That's a gift that I can give when I'm in the right space.
Wow, that's so profound. That's something really worth meditating on, to use your thinking. So, do you think the injuries, we're talking about positive relationships, has the injury had negative impact on relationships and friendships for you?
It definitely challenged my family relationships. So, and that's something I'm still working on. So my mother really couldn't see me at all after my injury. She found it too depressing. So that was very challenging. But we went a long way as she died. She died probably about 10 years ago, a bit more. As she died, and thank God I was meditating at the time, I was able to sit with her and be with her, and we went a long way. Yeah, that's probably family relationships. They struggle with my changed role in the family. And I struggle, I should say. It's not just them, it's both of us.
So if you had your life over again, and could change the past, would you not have your injury? Would you not have got onto the shoulders of that guy?
I don't think I would. I mean, nobody would.
But what would you have lost if you hadn't have got on those shoulders?
Yeah, a lot. I think I would have lost a lot, for sure. It's. I don't know. I don't know whether you can learn this stuff any other way. It's a hard road to learn it, and I see people who fully embraced teachings who can learn it, maybe. But I probably wouldn't have ever gone there. So that's a really hard question, Shane.
I do love the way you've answered it, though, which is to say that I would like to have been able to learn it another way, but I'm not sure you can learn it without the challenge that you've faced. Of course, we can't go back in time, so all we can be is thankful for what we have learned. Yeah. As you know, these videos are going to a bunch of people who've lived with the injury a lot less time than you and I have. Is there anything else that I've not asked you that you would like to say to them or let them know about life and what's possible?
I always thought that that I wish that I'd been introduced to meditation, and meditation was like a compulsory component as part of rehabilitation. That I took some time and I had support to take some time to be still and to really feel where I was at before I left hospital, or as I left hospital, so that I could develop a trust and a knowledge of myself, because it's such a massive change that the really this being still has been the thing that has given me the most and allowed me to find the ways of supporting myself, or finding ways to realising what needs to be nurtured, what needs to be supported. Being still and remembering that there are ways to find meaning, or find what's important, to express what's important to you. And also, getting support with relationship skills, like that kind of support. It's intense, the learning that it's just was thrown at me in terms of relationship, and I watch people who struggle with that, in hospital, and I realise how much harder it makes life if you're not given the time and space, or you don't give yourself the time and space, and the realisation that those relationships are really difficult. It is really challenging, and it's not something that you should naturally be able to navigate. It's gonna be difficult.
Yeah, you can have someone come in to wake you up and be in your personal space at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And I don't think the hospital system's great at I think it's gotten a lot better at giving the staff the support to navigate that sensitively either. So I remember when I left, I always felt it was my fault. But it's a system that doesn't really look at and value those relationships and see that they're challenging and difficult and crucial and central to health and well-being.
Sara, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I've learned a lot talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.